Hey everyone, it's been a while. Thank you so much for your patience. I know it's been like about 4 months, but I'm back. School can be busy, but I needed a break. But now that it's over, I made the most of my vacation. It hit me how much these videos really help me stay occupied. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. Please feel free to email me your true scary stories at silversscarystories@gmail.com. I'll display it on the screen and I'll leave it in the descriptions. Whether it's a short story or a longer one, I'm all ears. If you'd rather stay anonymous, just let me know in your email. I can't wait to read your terrifying experiences and share them with our horror community. Let's dive in to these True Scary Stories, Volume 5. Some of these stories contain graphic content. Viewers' discretion is advised. For reference, I am a female, and this is something that I went through 11 years ago. Let me go back to the beginning to set the basis of what happened. In May 2007, I moved from a small town back to Phoenix, Arizona, to help my cousin, who at the time was going to a place that works with the blind and visually impaired. She suggested I should join, and so I did. After being there for 3 short months, they asked me to volunteer, so I accepted. While I was there, I met a lot of amazing people that I not only helped, but also worked with, but also became very close friends with. Those 2 people were Courtney and Lawrence, who were dating at the time. At no given time did Lawrence ever disrespect me or give me any kind of creepy vibes that would ever raise red flags. But all that would change on that night of February 18, 2013. A couple of days before the incident, Courtney asked me if I can go and help Lawrence clean his apartment for an inspection on the 19th. She said she had a reunion to go to on the 18th, and so she couldn't be there. That's the day that would change my life forever. So on February 18, 2013, I went over to Lawrence's apartment to clean it and get it ready for the manager to inspect it. After I got to his apartment, we said our hellos and he introduced me to a friend of his and showed me where everything that would need to be clean in that apartment. In the afternoon, we ordered lunch. So we ate and talked a little before I decided to go back to cleaning, while he and his friend talked. Sometime in the early evening, Lawrence's friend said goodbye and left. As I finished up and sat down, before I forget to mention, Lawrence was severely visually impaired, almost blind, but that doesn't excuse him for what he did. Let me give a short description of how things were set up. Lawrence had a 6-person table placed under a window in his living room, 1 chair at each end and 2 on each side, which faced the window. While I was there, I sat on the chair at the end of the table, at the left side of the window. Lawrence sat in the second chair closest to the right side of the table. So anyways, the day was over and I was waiting for my ride to pick me up. Lawrence said, "I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be right back." I said, "Okay," and continued looking through social media. But after 10 minutes, he hadn't come back. I got up and walked to his bedroom, calling out his name. He didn't reply, so I poked my head into the door and saw that he was laying on his bed, asleep. At least he appeared to be asleep, not wanting to wake him up. I went and sat back down on a chair, rolled a cigarette, and got ready to go outside and smoke it, and to check on my ride. But before I did, Lawrence got up. I saw him come out of the room slowly, and like in a daze, he started walking towards the table where I was sitting. As he got closer, I yelled, "Hey, Terrence, I'm still here." But there was no response as he kept walking forward. Because I knew his eyesight was a problem, I reached out and grabbed the chair closest to me and held it as he bumped into it. As he reached me, I heard him making a grunting noise. I turned my head sideways and realized he had something in his hand, which was repeatedly coming down at me. That's when it dawned on me, with the blood now pouring down from my head, that he was stabbing me multiple times. Once I realized what he was doing, I quickly let go of the chair and sat all the way back into my chair and started screaming. "What are you doing? Oh my God, you just stabbed me in the head." I grabbed my phone and called 911. But before I can get up, Lawrence moved both front chairs and kneeled down beside me, causing me to jump closer to the wall because he still had a knife in his hand. As he went to touch my arm, I jerked back and pushed past him while screaming, "Oh my God, you just stabbed me in the effing head. Oh my God, I don't want to die." Lawrence was upset and yelled, "You're not going to die." And I said, "Are you serious? I am bleeding from my head. Don't you understand? You just stabbed me." That's when I heard a voice say, "Ma'am, did you just say someone stabbed you in the head?" I said, "Yes, my friend who I'm here helping came out and started stabbing me in the head." That is when Lawrence came up and said, "Here, you can have the knife if you want it." I said, "No, I don't want the knife." I heard the 911 operator say something, and that is when I took the knife and threw it to the counter. By now, with everything that was going on, I realized I hadn't grabbed anything to stop the bleeding. I went to the bathroom and grabbed a towel, as instructed by the 911 operator. After pacing the kitchen, I went and sat down on the couch while Lawrence sat at the table. I said to the 911 operator, "Do me a favor, if I don't make it." She asked what it was, and I told both my daughter's name. I said, "Will you tell both of them to also tell my grandchildren that I'm sorry that I couldn't be there for the rest of their lives? But I swear I love them with mine." When I saw Lawrence getting up from the table, I ran out of the apartment, banging on the doors for help, and leaving a trail of blood behind. But no one would answer their doors as I heard the sirens. Shaking and in tears, I put my back up against the wall and waited for the police and the paramedics. I noticed that Lawrence had closed his door. Coming through the outside door, I saw the police and the paramedics and I think the 911 operator, and hang up as the police barged through Lawrence's door. I can hear them say, "Phoenix Police, put your hands up where I can see them." As the paramedics attended to me, an officer asked me if I wanted to press charges. I watched as they brought him out in cuffs, alone, in shock and scared. I really didn't know what to say. As stupid as it sounds, I was worried what my friend Courtney would say. After they stabilized me and got me into the ambulance, I knew I was safe, but the paramedics told me I had to stay awake. All I wanted to do was sleep, but one of them told his partner to step onto it, and we drove to the hospital with lights and sirens. At the hospital, they got me in a bed and started taking care of the 2 wounds on the top of my head. Like the paramedics, they ignored me as I repeatedly told them that he had come down with me with a knife 5 times. No further examination on my head was done. They just stuck 9 needles on the wound to numb my head, and 11 staples to close the 2 wounds, and they sent me home. The way I was treated that night by all the medical personnel left me feeling victimized again. Because of their lack of empathy and the way they took care of me even after being told by the police that it was a near fatal stabbing. Then about a month later, I received a letter from the DA simply saying, "After reviewing your case, we do not feel at this time that if taken to court, that we could get a conviction beyond reasonable doubt, nor do we feel like a felony crime has been committed." I can't even begin to try to convey or express to anyone how mentally, emotionally, and physically traumatizing that night was. But it is something that has forever changed me, and the person I was before is gone. I can never be her again. For reference, I'm a female. This is something I experienced when I was either 24 or 25 in the early fall of those years. Then, I was a single mom of 2 daughters, and we lived in a small town in Arizona called Whitman. While living there, I met a lot of people. Some I became good friends with, and others, no thank you. But one of those people that I met was a sweet old man named Mr. Green. Mr. Green lived alone. He was a tall, lanky man that wore thick glasses, had shoulder-length brown and gray hair, and a goatee. I remember the many times I would go over to his house while my kids were at school, so I could help him clean his own house. Not that he really needed my help, but because he always kept it pretty clean. I think he was just lonely and just wanted some company. I really enjoyed listening to the stories that he would tell me while I clean. I remember the couple of times, and even the day before. I would go over to his house, and as soon as I enter, I could smell the gas. Looking at Mr. Green, I told him that I smelled gas and he should probably contact the gas company or the manager. And he just looked at me, shrugged, and said, I called the gas company and told them they have a gas leak, but they said they couldn't send someone out there for at least a week. Shocked, I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? This is an emergency." He just nodded and moved to another part of the house to finish what he was doing. The rest of my time there, I couldn't help but have this god-awful sinking feeling in my gut that something bad was going to happen. And it did. Later that night, I had a hard time sleeping because I was so worried about him. I thought to myself that I would get a hold of the gas company, and I did, but it came a little too late. 2 days later, in the mid-evening, I was standing in my kitchen doing dishes when I got the pounding on my door. Opening the door, I saw my friend Sticks. He was out of breath. He pointed and mumbled at something. At first, I couldn't hear. "Sticks, what's wrong? What happened?" I asked. Now, getting the knot in my stomach, I started to ask him again, and that's when he said, Mr. Green's house." Realizing what he said, I screamed, "Oh my God, no," and took off running towards his house, yelling back to him, "Watch the girls, I'll be right back." Getting to Mr. Green's house, I saw what was left of it, the lights of the fire department and the firefighters and people running and standing around. In shock and horror, I stood there looking around for anyone that I can ask what happened, but I didn't see anyone close to me. "Excuse us, ma'am." Shaking my head, I mumbled, what?" As I stepped back, that's when I realized that they were bringing the gurney through. Right in front of me, that's when I smelled something so sickening that made me so nauseous and lightheaded that I almost passed out. That's when I saw Mr. Green on it, covered in a white sheet, partially soaked in dark stains, looking down. That's when I saw part of his head and face were exposed. I gasped and tried to scream, but I couldn't. I guess that's when one of those paramedics realized what was going on and tried to cover him, but they stumbled a little, and that's when his right arm fell right out under the sheet, lightly brushing against my left leg and dripping body fluids and water onto my feet. In horror, I just stood there, unable to move or do anything, and that's when everything went black. To this day, I don't remember how I got home. What I saw and smelled that night was so horrific that for a long time afterwards, left me traumatized. And even to this day, it's still deeply burned into my memories. Now that I told you what happened and what I experienced, now let me tell you the story of what happened as told to me by those who were there firsthand. Evidently, that day a friend had been over to visit, and about an hour later, they left. Mr. Green went to cook dinner, and as he turned the burner on to light it, that's when it exploded, throwing him across the room. At the time of the explosion, neighbors said that they remember hearing a loud sound like a bomb going off. Going outside to check on what happened, that's when they saw Mr. Green on fire and screaming for help. As someone called 911, one person grabbed a water hose, while others filled plastic containers with water and started spraying and dumping it on him. They managed to put the fire out, but that's when they saw that he was so severely burned that large parts of his body were blackened with his skin either hanging or falling off, and one of his arms and hand had been partially blown off. After the fire department got there, they finished putting out the house fire. As the paramedics got there and attended to Mr. Green, who, accordingly to one of the neighbors, despite his injuries, lived up to 10 to 15 minutes after the explosion, Mr. Green died a very painful death, and an unimaginable death that could have been prevented if only the manager cared enough and wasn't so greedy.
It has taken me many years to tell the story out of both fear and embarrassment. I share this story today as more than simply therapy for myself, but as a warning to all people. Be careful who you meet on social media. In 2018, my ex-husband and I were at the end of a very confusing marriage. He and I have been polyamorous for about 3 years before I met this guy. Polyamorous is where I'm free to meet other people while my husband is also free to meet others. So anyways, this guy that I met, his name was Jez. I met Jez on OkCupid. I was 28 and he was 42. We hit it off very quickly. After a few weeks of talking, I agreed to meet up with him at a restaurant close by to my house. We sat and talked for a few hours before I invited him over to be my husband. Things went very, very well, and they seemed to get along very well as well. So, Jez and I started dating. This guy completely swept me off my feet. Jez was very sweet and caring. He enthusiastically listened to every little thing on my mind, engaged and validated me. Over and over again, he absolutely revered me for my strength and wisdom. He practically worshipped me for all that I was and all I was becoming. He showered me with gifts, flowers, and random good deeds just to make me feel safe, wanted, and cared for. I've never been in a relationship for something like that for quite a while. It was wonderful. It was as though we had been looking for each other for years. After the first few weeks, he had a meltdown over my polyamorous nature. He pulled the plug because he said he was already falling for me and he couldn't handle sharing me. I stood my ground and accepted this boundary and the fact that I would have to let him go. I felt that night was sad, but confident that I had done the right thing for the both of us. That next week, he sent me flowers and a card to my workplace, begging for another chance and reassuring me that he'd rather try and not end things than he just end up regretting it. Even though it was scary, he wanted to take this journey with me. We continued dating and it was just as wonderful. Long nights we spent awake talking, sharing, laughing, lovemaking, and planning. We went places and did things that I've always wanted to do. Then in the deepest, most intimate moments, we would just sit in silence. He would grip my hands to his face in solidarity, in astonishment, asking, "Where have I been all this time?" Our time together was effortless. We fit together like a puzzle piece. By August of 2018, my marriage had ended, by no fault of Jez, and by October, my husband had moved out. I was on a lease at the time and knew that I couldn't afford a place on my own, so finding a roommate was essential. I had no support system to fall back on, nor did anyone else I knew need a place at the time. So, Jez offered to move in. Even then, I was hesitant. We had only been together for 4 months, and I knew everything always changes when you move in with your partner. Despite my hesitation, I agreed. He was wonderful to me. How bad could it be? I wasn't prepared for the change that was to come. It was literally the night and day. Jazz suddenly became a different person. He was extremely controlling, jealous, and lazy. Nothing like the person I thought I met. And the way he treated me progressively had gotten worse and worse. Hanging out with friends became a burden, if not impossible. Because he would blow my phone, guilt me about leaving him alone and not involving him in a way. Yet, when I tried to, it was also treated as a burden and inconvenience, as he would huff and puff his way through, even though the concept of leaving space for anyone but ourselves. In December of 2018, we attended my work Christmas party. I had given him the option whether he wanted to go or not. It was really neither here or there for me, because I had already learned that he really didn't do well if he was felt under pressure into social situations. I opened the invitation to him because he had expressed to me over and over that it was important for him, that he was involved in my social life. For the full month he knew about it, he insisted that he wasn't going. I took it as him being an introvert, but didn't push the issue. I let him know that I would make sure that he felt welcome if he decided to go, but not to feel obligated. I was surprised when he changed his mind at the last minute and insisted on going, and even more stunned when we went, and he actively acted though he didn't want to be there. Everyone there was incredibly welcoming and included him in the festivities and conversations. However, he still practically grumbled the entire night about the whole thing, mumbling insults and critiquing every little part of the party under his breath, as though being there was absolutely awful to him. No one really seems to notice the low whisper insults and gripes. At one point, after a couple of glasses of wine, my direct manager leaned into Jez and started praising him. She and I were very close. Therefore, she was intimately familiar with what I had gone through with my ex-husband. "I am so happy that she found you," she bleated through wine, happy. "You have been absolutely transported for her. It's so nice to see her finally happy and appreciated." Without missing a beat, Jez grimaced at the comment and quickly snapped back. "You don't effing know me." I honestly didn't believe my ears. It was one of those moments where time stops and you just know that you couldn't have heard it correctly. I sat brewing on it for a minute before another light-hearted interaction with Jez prompted him to suddenly snap back at me through gritted teeth. "Stop it." This triggered me, and I lost it. I pulled him outside and asked him what his problem was. I called out his behavior and told him that if he wasn't going to stop acting this way, then he could just leave. That if he didn't want to be here, then he should just stayed home. He ended up giving me some sort of half-ass apology, and we went back inside and finished the party. I remember the drive home that night, staring at the dark window at nothing in particular, in worried silence. I might have messed up. It was my only thought through the entire drive. It all started very slow, of course, like waving me away or invalidating my experience and ideas due to my age. That I was just dramatizing my experiences because I was young, etc. The man who, not 6 months prior, had validated me, my trauma, and my experiences to the end of the earth. Now, every time I started a story or tried to share anything, even trying to plan out meals for the week, he would just openly show annoyance as though I was validating his time and attention. Before I knew it, he was snapping at me over every little thing. If I asked how his day was or talked about my day, he would aggressively shut it down. Why do you always ask me that? I don't want to talk shop at home. I really don't care about your work. It's work. Before I knew it, I couldn't even bring him to a plate of breakfast without being snapped at. It was though that he was testing me. When Jez and I started dating, he flat out refused to talk about most of his exes. He refuses to name them or discuss any issues with them or lessons with them. They didn't matter to him. He would claim they weren't in his life for a reason. It was the same reasoning he also used in reference to my more recent exes. Talking about them, including my now ex-husband, may as well have been off limits. Anytime I brought up either of our exes, he would become incredibly agitated, belittling, and just overall very aggressive. I took this as both our age gap issues, as I have a tendency to dwell, as well as insecurities and a threat to the life he was trying to build. However, after he moved in, this hot button topic had been established several times. He would bring up his exes and how they looked, telling me more and more than one occasion that he would have never dated me back in the day, and that I was lucky he lowered his standards. I didn't even know what to say to this. I would laugh it off and shove it in the back of my pocket. I kept it noted in my mind. He then started bringing up my looks and appearances and accusing me of catfishing him. I had stopped taking care of myself due to isolation and had always put on some weight. So most of my clothes that I once fit in and felt great in no longer fit me. And since Jez has always been dishonest with me about his financial position, he was always needing extra money here and there, leaving me broke almost all the time. A horrible tragedy happened that followed that summer. While Jez and I were good together, I received a notice that a good friend that I went to art school with shot himself in the head while tripping on LSD. Our whole class was devastated. He was without contested the best photographer of our class and one of the most kind-hearted individuals I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Also was someone who was very familiar with LSD. I was rocked. However, Jez was far from supportive. He would pretty much immediately shrugged it off. Life is life. I guess that's what he gets for effing around with LSD. I was baffled at such the unsympathetic response, and even more later when Jez started to interrogate me about my relationship with this guy, asking when was the last time I had even talked to this friend. You don't even know this guy anymore. Who cares? I broke up with him for the first time ever. He called me at work raging. I was busy, so I wasn't able to answer right away. But once I finally able to answer the phone, I met with this intense anger. It was stormy, and one of my dogs was having an anxiety attack due to the storm and separation anxiety. This wasn't the first time, and he was well aware of what she had needed in those moments. Why the F aren't you answering my calls? You answer when I call you. I don't care where you are. He went on for a few minutes, calling me a crappy girlfriend and laying into me over my sudden distance and lack of communication while I was at work. At this point, I was done. and I lost it. I tore into him over everything, especially causing problems for me at work. That being in my life is a privilege, and if he was going to wake up every day acting like he hates me, then I don't know what on earth he's going to be doing with me. I told him that I expected him to get his things and leave. He was always threatening to go back to his old roommates, where there was still a room. I didn't want him there when I got home, and we would coordinate times for him to come and get the rest. He flat out refused, suddenly victimizing himself, claiming he had nowhere to go. How dare you make me fall in love with you? How dare you take me to meet your father and then dump me? My manager and her husband ended up following me home that evening because she was concerned for my safety and had offered to let me stay with her for a few days. I would never forget the scene that I walked into. Like Theon Greyjoy, begging for his life. My boss stood next to me, watching as this 42-year-old crawled on his knees before me, begging for mercy and communication. At this point, wrapping his arms around my legs, crying into them. I can't believe this is happening. She's the love of my life, you know that? He cried to my boss. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. This was the antithesis of the heartless person that I'd been spending my days with. I shook him off and went back into my house, gather enough of my things to get me through the few days, as well as any and all valuables I could think of. It took me a few days, but after a week, Jazz started blowing up my phone, apology after apology. Suddenly, he was the man that I met again, full of humility and self-awareness. He acknowledged the awful way he had treated me and sent me walls and walls as well, thought-out messages, psychoanalyzing his own behavior, where it comes from, and the ways he knows that needs to be changed. As foolish I was, I took him back. I was a desperate girl, so, again, I took him back. It wasn't long until this second round that he started to guilt me over the breakup. My panic had damaged his relationship with people in my life, and he made sure that I knew it was my responsibility to fix it. It wasn't long after this that my car ended up breaking down at the gas station close to my home. There was a very nice couple in the vehicle next to me that came to my rescue and checked out things under my hood. The gentleman turned out to be a mechanic for a living, so he had a pretty good theory about what could potentially be going wrong. This time, I had already attempted to contact Jez to let him know what was going on, and there I was. It wasn't long until he got off work, so he told me to sit tight and he would be there shortly. Meanwhile, this sweet couple stayed and kept me company while I waited. Jazz barreled in about 15 minutes later, completely ignoring the couple that helped me. Touched base. The gentleman handed me a slip of paper with a name and phone number on it, reviewing what he thought was going on with my car. Before Jess butt in, cutting him off. I said she's fine, he snapped. I could see the woman out of the corner of my eye, slinking away of this comment and getting to the passenger of the seat of their car. I could suddenly feel the sudden tension, like maybe she's been there before. The gentleman didn't move and shifted his attention to me as Jez walked into the store. I could see he clearly was concerned. He asked me, "Are you okay?" He asked me in a low, almost whisper. "You don't have to answer that, but if you need anything." He looked down at the number in my hand and nodded it. "Seriously." With that, He got into his driver's seat of his car and drove away. I thought about that couple countless times that night. Everything went right back the way it was before, as though the initial breakup never even happened. The same eggshells, the same belittling. If anything, it was just worse, because I had permanently damaged our relationship. If I had not just been so dramatic, if I didn't run away from everything, then maybe he wouldn't have to work so hard for respect in my life. One night, we got into an argument. I don't even remember what it was about. I had to be up early for work the next morning, so I paused the argument in order to get some sleep. When I went to lay down, I heard the TV on. I have a sound bar, so the volume can get pretty loud. Jez proceeded to turn the volume up and up and up, far past the volume I ever pushed in those damn speakers. Even for parties, the very walls were vibrating with the sounds of the TV. Jez then started laughing hysterically. It was a laugh, maniac with anger, as those might have been funny on TV, but he might have also jumped through a window right now. I remember laying in bed, absolutely horrid at what was happening. I knew things had gotten bad, and now I was scared. I got out of bed and asked him to turn it down, to which he responded, scoffing, "I'll watch TV if I effing want to," and turn up even louder. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I started crying at this point, begging him to please just let me sleep. He started mocking me and calling me names for crying. "Poor crybaby, crying again? That's your card, isn't it? Crying?" This caused the fight to start over again, and he started screaming at me, followed me to my bedroom, where he suddenly punched a door not 2 inches from my head. His eyes were black, and he looked at me into my eyes, sending the clear, unsympathetic, and hostile message that was a warning, and next time he wouldn't miss. My whole system had shut down at this point. I sunk into the floor in a panic attack. My ex-husband had issues with violence. Jez knew that. All our rental priors to that one holes into the walls and doors, peppered throughout the unit due to my ex-husband's inability to handle his emotions. But he never hit me, or even came close to it. I crumbled to the ground, feeling powerless, trapped and afraid. As my thoughts continued to race, he continued to berate me and mock my panic state. Most of our arguments from that night was a blur, but ended abruptly once he threatened to put my social security number into the dark web. At this point, all that was left in me was to fight. I blacked out and went ballistic, screaming at him to get out. I felt rabid and dangerous as I screamed, like a banshee, for him to leave my home. I have no idea what it became into. It was over, and I was ending it that second. I contacted my landlord and explained it what was going on. Jez would also end up contacting her, waving his own tail, that I was moving out and tried to have the lease transferred into his name. Luckily, since I was several steps ahead of him, my landlord didn't fall for it and contacted me immediately. She personally came and changed my locks for me, gave me the personal contact of a police officer close by in case he showed up again, and took half of my rent for the next month. I am forever grateful for her for the simple acts of kindness that were well above of anything that I would expect from a landlord. It took weeks for him to stop messaging me. The only reason I didn't block him was out of fear that he would show up at my house. Though I had contacts for protection, I knew I would rather get a daily apology video than have to deal with him on my doorsteps. So they persisted for a while. The same acts from before, the love bombing, the promises, grasping at straws trying to find the weak spots where I would get him back in. But I would ignore it. It continued for weeks before he eventually gave up. He bowed out of gracefully, stating boldly that he will always love me. I left him on red. The illusion was destroyed. It took me several years to pick up the pieces. If my divorce wasn't enough, this definitely made me lose trust in myself. I still don't understand what the endgame was. In one of our last discussions, I asked him desperately, what happened to the guy I fell in love with? Jez looked me dead in the eye and said, that guy doesn't exist. I told you what I had to tell you in order to get you away from that effing asshole husband of yours. You're just stupid and fell for it. Jez, let's not meet ever effing again. I'm in university right now, but staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends and we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age. We were talking, having fun, and it was nothing too serious, or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers. We hung out a couple of times, but he became incredibly clingy right from the start. So I decided to distance myself in the hopes that he would get the hint and back off. Well, he didn't. When I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind, it has been less than 2 weeks since we first met. I finally responded and told him that he needs to chill out. He appeared to calm down for a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed, and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, and that I was the best thing that has ever happened to him, etc. You know, just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to say to someone that you just barely know after 2 weeks. I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for the summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a fling. But this only made him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, calling me a hoe. Basically a complete 180 from what he was saying mere minutes ago. Then all of a sudden, the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "Stupid girl, you had better get ready because I am coming over for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was very frightening because he knew my parents were out of town for the week and that I was staying in their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was because I was always the one driving. And he didn't know my friends either. So, I thought that he had no way of figuring out himself. Since, again, I'm normally living at another school in another state. Regardless, I locked all the doors, shut the blinds, just in case. After a while, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked at my phone and saw a notification on my lock screen. It was from the Ring app indicating that there has been movement on my parents' camera. And yes, it was him. In the video, you can clearly see something in his hand. When he noticed the camera, however, he left right away. I immediately blocked him on everything and reported the incident. I have no idea what he was planning to do once he got here. It was terrifying to realize that he had come over when I was asleep and defenseless, and completely unaware of his presence, as I later found out that he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently, he Googled it and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with the parents' address. Since I'm on my parents' phone plan, I guess it shows up that I still live there. This revelation was effing horrifying, as I never knew my phone number could reveal my home address. I am still extremely upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for anyone to find it, as it's incredibly dangerous that websites will just give this away to anyone. Please learn from my mistake and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text and call people, and that number can't be traced back to you so easily. So, my advice is to use a disposable number for anyone that you're talking to that you just met informally or online. I still can't sleep at night. Hopefully, this never happens to anyone else. So, I was in ninth grade at a really crappy school. The system there sucked, and I was located in a very dangerous area of the city where I lived in. I actually just remember the story because it was so usual for things like this to happen there that, for me, it was just normal, so I forgot about it. But looking back now, I realized that it's not normal. So I was in PE class, and we were running laps around the school on the sidewalk to stretch. I was with my friend group of 5 girls, and we were walking behind as always because PE for us was just talking about the school drama, all period. So we were walking and talking about the recent drama when suddenly a red truck slowed down beside us. It wasn't unusual. Every time we were walking outside of school, a creepy man would slow down, so we didn't think any of it and just kept walking, ignoring him. We saw his truck 2 or 3 more times. He was driving around the school and slowing down every time he passed by us. So we decided to tell our teacher that made us go back inside in the gym. We started playing whatever game we were doing when the teacher came in to talk to me and told me that I was asked to go to the main office because someone was here to pick me up. I was panicking because no one was supposed to pick me up during the class that day, and I thought that maybe something bad happened to either my mom or my dad or someone in my family. So I got changed into my normal clothes, grabbed my backpack, and rushed to the office. When I got there, the lady told me that there was a man waiting for me outside the main doors. I got a little confused because usually when my parents come to pick me up, they wait in the hall until I got there. I took a look through the glass door and saw a very old man. I have never seen this man once in my life. I quickly walked back to the office and told the lady that I did not know this guy. And what she told me next froze me. She told me that he was a friend of my parents and that they asked him to come pick me up because my mother had gotten into a car accident. He told the lady my name and my last name and my age and my mom's name and the grade that I was in. I was completely shocked and immediately asked her if I could give a call to my parents to confirm this. And so I did. So I called my dad, and he told me that mom was just fine and he was at work. The lady told me to just go back to class, and I never saw that man again. I never knew what happened after I left. And how did he knew all this information about me? My parents talked to the cops about this, and there was never anything. We never had answers. Since that happened, I moved into a much safer city, and I hope I'll never see this man ever again. To put the context to my story, I was having a sleepover at my best friend's house in the summer of 2019, like we always did. We were 15 at the time. She lives in a small village where everybody knows everyone. There was no weird people there. It was super safe place to live in. Everyone was kind and friendly. It was 10 p.m. and it was really dark outside. We were hungry and wanted to bake cookies, but they didn't have all the ingredients to do so. So we decided to go to the nearest convenience store. It was a 5-minute walk in the dark because there were no streetlights. We started walking towards the store, talking and laughing about literally anything. On one side of the road, there was a huge church, built at the end of 1800s. It was abandoned, but they couldn't destroy it because it was historical. There's also a huge parking lot right in front that had small orange lights. On the other side of the road, the store we had to go into. When we passed on the sidewalk in front of the church, we heard a weird classical music playing. It was like a whisper. We turned our eyes to the parking lot, and there he was. I have goosebumps just thinking about it. There was no cars on the road. Nobody was outside. It was dark and cold. We saw a man, really tall and disgusting. His clothes were ripped, and he looked like he didn't even shower in months. He was dancing in the church parking lot, doing ballet figures to classical song at 10 p.m. at night. When we saw him, immediately we changed sidewalks to be far from him. Our hearts were racing as we entered the store. We got our things and went to the cashier. She made us pay, and we were panicked, so we told her about the man dancing in the parking lot. She was confused and went to the window to look, but no one was there. We were even more scared when we got to go outside. Neither of us had any cell phones. We couldn't call our dad to come pick us up. We took a deep breath and decided to pass by the neighborhood that was behind the convenience store instead of the main road in front, so our chances of seeing the man again would be a lot lower. We were always looking around us. Once we reached the main street, we almost had a heart attack. The man was there, dancing on the sidewalk right in front of our house. We were panicking. I started crying quietly as we walked back into the neighborhood. My friend told me that she knew some people of our high school that we were living by, and that we should go to their house. And so we did. He didn't believe us at first and didn't want to walk us to her house. It was almost 11, and he looked tired. But I think he changed his mind because he saw us crying. So he put on his shoes, and we started making our way back to the main street. We told him what happened as we arrived at the sidewalk, and there was nobody. The man was nowhere to be found. He walked us to her front door as we thanked him before entering the house and locked the door. We told our parents everything, and they just laughed at us, saying how we were being overdramatic, that it was one of the safest villages, and we probably saw the wrong thing. We're both 19, and we still have no idea what happened that night, but we stopped going out when it was dark. We talked about it sometimes, and neither of us can explain who he was and what he was doing. This is something that was super traumatic for me, but it was never discussed again in my household. I was talking with my mom about it the other night, and she still didn't say much about it. I just thought I would share my experience with you guys, so here we go. When I was 13, I got a Dell desktop for school. The internet was pretty new back in 2003. AOL and MySpace, Yahoo Messenger, AOL chat rooms. 16F Cali, anyone? AOL chat rooms was where I went. I was shy, overweight kid back then. Still shy to this day. But online, I could be anyone. I could say anything. It was amazing. I discovered so many things that I got from the internet. If I could be anyone, so could someone else. Thus, how I met one 27-year-old man. One night, I logged on to AOL dial-up. The sound still makes me feel uneasy. I was sitting in my cold, dark kitchen. The computer was here, so I could be monitored. It was just me and my mom, though. She was always working, so no one really monitored me. Plus, she had no idea how to use the computer, so I got away with it a lot. I was bored, so I hopped into AOL chat room, lurked for a bit, then 15F here. I was really 13, but saying that I was 15 made me feel much more mature. Incoming private message. Hey, my name is Rob. Where are you from? And that's how it started. I told where I was from, that I was in high school, which was a lie. My school was from 7th to 12th grade. You? 19, male, New York. Oh man, it was really cool talking to an older guy. And boy, he was cute. Honestly, I don't really remember much. Maybe I blanked out. Maybe my memory was just shot. I do remember emails back and forth. The occasional phone call. I remember finding out that he was talking to another girl and I wanted to break things off with him. But he begged and pleaded until I caved in. Then, the let's meet. We met up. I was so nervous. He had never asked for a pic. Had never really asked for much from me. Just the emails back and forth. A phone call a day. But somehow, he made me feel safe. Made me feel like I was wanted. To care for. He drove from New York to West Virginia one day. My mom worked right beside my house, so he parked about a quarter-mile away and took the back alley to enter my house. My friend was with me, so when he showed up, but was scared when she saw him and ran out to the back door. I maybe should have taken a hint from that, but I stood there in the back porch with my head down. I was given a hug as he led me inside. Not 5 minutes after being there, sitting on the couch, did he move things further. Then further into the bedroom. I wouldn't get into the details of what happened next. I assume most can guess. After he left, with instructions to get into his car after I get off the school bus, and we will go on a date. I had no idea where he was staying. I live extremely far in the country, an hour's drive from the closest hotel. The next day, I get ready for school, ride the bus for the 45-minute drive. And as soon as I hop off in the school parking lot, I get directly into his car. No one noticed, no one said anything. We drove around, never go on a date. He just finds different places to park so he can use me. I noticed a photo of a younger girl, 15 or 16, in the visor of his car. I questioned him. Believe when he told me that it was his cousin. Believe when I questioned him why his hairline is receding so much. Believe him when he tells me that I can't see his driver's license because he left it at the hotel. Believe him when he said that he loved me. I get dropped back off at school, super sad that he had to go back home, with promises that he will call again. Everything seems very fuzzy. I can't remember many emotions from this time. I do remember that a few days later, my mom said that she found out that I was skipping school with a man, that I was never to see him again, and that was that. I do remember sending him an email. I remember a late night phone call. I do remember saying, I wish I could just live with you. I remember him suggesting to come get me. I remember saying, okay. Days later, by the time he made the drive again, I was feeling iffy about leaving my mom. I loved her after all. I didn't think things through. I didn't put much thought into really anything. I packed a few clothes in a suitcase. Forgot all underwear. That is one of my sharpest memories. I felt bad that he drove 8 hours to get me, so I left in the middle of the night. I got into the car with them and his cousin. He got into the back seat with me and proceeded to do things with me while his cousin drove. Then, get back in the front seat. This happened a few times between my home and his. The drive took forever. I had nothing to drink. I was offered nothing when they got something. They stopped to nap at the rest stop, and I attempted to call my mom, which was disabled on our phone. I dug around for some change to get something to drink, but I couldn't afford anything in the convenience store. So I drank out of the truck stop sink. Hours later, we park a block away from his house while he runs to get something. I'm sitting in the back seat, waking up from a nap when around 8 or so men and women in black suits surround the car, screaming for us to get out with our hands up. My first thought, crap, first 10 minutes in New York and I'm already being robbed. I am terrified. I get out and a man pulls up over the curb while the other officers force his cousin into the ground. All the while, they're asking my name and age, telling me to tell his cousin my age. I am put back into an unmarked car, driven to the NYPD. Past reporters, cameras, news trucks, stuck into the back of the station, where I see Rob in handcuffs for the last time. And for in love, 14-year-old me, this is devastating. I am taken to a room and questioned for hours. I am then taken to a hospital. Then a hotel where a nice woman brings me Taco Bell and stays with me until I fall asleep. The next day, 2 FBI officers escort me home on a plane, where I get off and where I'm greeted by police officers, my mother, and a horde of news reporters. I later found out that when my mom reported me missing to the police did not really do much at all. They didn't even take the picture of me. Luckily, she had his license plates number. She remembers seeing his car parked by the road that first meeting. She took note of it since it was an out-of-state car. Thanks to her being vigilant, I do find this to be the only reason why I'm alive today. The police said they would look into it, but it wasn't enough for my mom. She contacted a family friend, who in turn contacted the governor of West Virginia, who in turn made the police look further into it. After they ran the license plate number, looked into the man, and found out who he was. That's when they issued an Amber Alert, noting that I was in extreme danger. My cousin told my mom that he looked at Rob's rap sheet, and it was about a mile long, but wouldn't tell my mother what was on it, for fear of scaring her more. I never went to court. I never went to any hearing, but I did fall into a horrible depression. My friends' parents wouldn't let them hang out with me. Students would spray paint "Ho" on my locker door at school. I had no friends, but most of all, I thought a man was in prison for loving me. When I learned that he got a sentence of 10 years in prison, which he served every year of it, I became deeply troubled. I was in and out of a mental hospital for self-harm for years, on a slew of depression medication. Psychiatrists never talked to me about anything. I had to process it all by myself. My teenager years were better though. I transferred schools, made best friends, graduated, but still, in the back of my mind, I felt that I was the reason the man lost 10 years of his life, until I was told that he got out of prison. A couple years after he got out, I contacted him on Facebook. At the time, I was around 24 or 25. He told me that if I ever contact him again, he would unalive both me and my mother. That he still knows where I live. I had no idea what he was planning to do with me. My mom still says selling me to a human trafficker. I was told that he had other girls around my age that he was talking to. Some good things happened because of my kidnapping. Schools all over my state started internet safety education classes. Kids were taught safety. Parents were taught how to keep kids safe. No other girls were taken by this man. So, to the man who ruined so many years of my life, I'm currently 29 now. I am happy, healthy, and have zero remorse that you are now listed as level 3 human traffic offenders. That you were imprisoned for so many years. Edit. Thank you everyone who has in turn shared your story with me. I feel less alone, and thank you to the kind strangers who lifted gold and silver. I was very lucky. I had a mom who never gave up. I was lucky that she raised me. As a single mother, I know it was hard for her. She had to deal with my depression, my anxiety, and acting out. She would visit me every single day when I was in the mental hospital as a teenager, which totaled about a month at 3 different times. She would work 2 jobs to make sure that I had all the help that I needed. Take me after work, a 12-hour shift to alternative school because I was kicked out of a regular school for self-harm. I have read every comment and tried to reply to most of them. To all the women and men who have commented that they have experienced something very similar, experienced being naive, being taken advantage of, thought that the internet was safe back then. My heart goes out to each and every single one of you. But I'm also very proud of you. Proud that you overcame it. That you are still here today. A lot of people don't understand how intoxicating it could be to have someone older and experienced interested in you. How that feeling of falling prey to someone lingers with you always. If you have kids, please check on what they are doing online. You may trust them, but don't trust the creeps that linger. They're out there. While your kid might be smart, and you know that they will never do anything crazy, still, it never hurts to check.
Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoy this, please like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. Just like I said earlier, if you have a true scary story, please email to me at silversscarystories@gmail.com. Good night, farewell, and remember, don't get lost in the dark.